Two straight Phoenix Suns wins after a couple of ugly losses. Have the Phoenix Suns realized their dynasty as an offensive juggernaut after a full season defending like mad? Maybe. And Kevin Durant is coming back. We're live. It's Locked On Suns. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we are back. This is Locked On Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here late Monday. We are live on YouTube. If you're finding us right now for the first time, or maybe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform after the fact in an on-demand fashion, go ahead and hit follow. Go ahead and hit subscribe. Get us in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Get locked on to your favorite team. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns to get new shows there. Maybe some retweets of KD feuding with Charles Barkley. You never know what you're going to get over there. We are live, as I've said a couple of times already. Brendon Dueñas is joining us 1 day late. Appreciate everybody being patient over the long weekend. I was out of town, got some nice R&R there. But we have a Suns win to talk about. We have 2 Suns wins to talk about over a 3-game little weekend here leading up through Monday night. Brendon, before we dive into that, you're into March Madness, I would say, more than most people that I know. Most years, college basketball, NBA scouting, all that stuff, you are in that world. Is this tournament getting even your attention? I know the Suns don't even have a pick, but I was thinking about hopping on with you today, and I'm like, is this tournament even getting Brandon's attention with how ugly it has been?
There's a tournament going on.
That's how I feel.
But honestly, it's been rough. It's been brutal. I'm not following March Madness as close as I have in the past, just due to my new job. It's just tough to balance that many things going into March. So, you're not going to get any detailed big boards from me this year, unfortunately. I just haven't followed it as closely as I'd like to get that down. And honestly, it could be for the best. But but just going back to the Suns, I mean, what a difference 2 games makes. Just, winning a game against Philly that they, a lot of us probably had no faith in them pulling off, and then coming back against a tough Utah team that they've struggled with at times before, and the bench unit stepping up again. So it's been a little bit of March Madness Suns version between Tony Buckets and Terrence Ross.
Yes, it has. So 117-103, the final score here on Monday night. The Suns beat Utah. Yeah, that game early in the year where the Jazz won by 1 point was one of the more fun games of the season. We got a Booker Markkanen duel back when we weren't sure if this Lauri Markkanen renaissance was actually real. So that was a fun one. This game, not as exciting, unfortunately, for, I guess, the entertainment factor, but obviously the Suns will take a double-digit win where Paul only has to play 27 minutes, Booker only has to play 34 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. But you look down the rotation, Brandon, this weekend, and I think you and I have talked about the rotation almost every single show that we've done basically since the Durant trade. And I'm done making predictions about who's going to play, but regardless of who is going to be in that rotation come playoff time, you have 60 bench points, if not more, against the Kings. You have close to that against the Sixers. And then tonight, you're getting 40, 50, something like that. So it has been raining from this bench over the weekend, and that is not something we've been used to. And I think when we talk about if this sort of outscoring everybody is going to just be what it is for the Suns down the stretch, I feel like that bench doing its job is a big reason why you might feel like that's even a possibility versus early on in the year, and obviously in the middle of the season when it felt like if even 2 guys could score double digits, it was going to be a miracle.
Yeah, and I think the main thing, and I tweeted this out, is just the reps. These guys are getting together, and now it's not like they've had a ton of reps either. This has been a pretty weird, transition with, Campaign and Landry Shamet both dealing with injuries, coming back from that. And then, Ross, and then Warren's minutes have been, hit or miss, and he's finally starting to get some steady play and regaining that confidence and looking like the Tony buckets that we know that can, as EJ would say, he can get a bucket in a photo booth. This guy's just a born scorer. He's, finding his confidence. And when him and Ross get going, you have two completely different types of scorers too, that, Ross, when he's on, he can miss three straight shots badly, and it's not going to phase him in terms of his confidence. He's going to keep shooting, and that's what the Suns' second unit needs. So I think those two guys, along with the confident Campaign, just makes a huge difference. And, just getting 3 straight games from the bench showing up, that's massive. And I think that, especially when KD comes back, if you're getting positive minutes out of the bench, it's a wrap for this league. Like, it truly is. If the Suns are healthy and their bench is producing, look out.
Yeah, I think the one thing is obviously who is going to be able to reliably do this, right? Because even Terrence Ross, there were games right before this stretch where we would have been questioning him. And I think there's been games even before that, even some of the ones when Durant was healthy, where we were wondering about the defense, right? The Mavs game, the Bucks game that Durant didn't play in, that was leading up to Durant's debut, some of those high profile games where he just wasn't able to guard. And so that's going to be a question. I think Warren looked pretty solid defensively against the Jazz. And I saw some people, noting that on Twitter as well. And I'm sure Suns fans were noticing it who were listening. That's pretty big. And that's why I thought, honestly, that he made so much sense to be one of the main guys in this rotation when the trade first went down and we started to see what the roster was going to look like. Is he's just big, and you can't really replace that, right? Like, Ish Wainwright is getting a lot of minutes solely because he can make shots and use his size well. And if Warren can do that, there's obviously going to be a role for him. So I think the two-way ability of the guys who have been producing is still a question to me, and the consistency of playing both sides. And then just what are the combinations going to be like that, Monty is comfortable with, that these guys, like you mentioned with the reps, are able to kind of make one another better at. But you have to be happy with what you're getting. The other big news from this game, Brandon, this Sunday night game or Monday night game, was Deandre Ayton's return. He was out during some of the ugly losses, as well as beating Philadelphia, which is pretty huge considering Joel Embiid was on the other side there. But 14-8 for him. We were texting a little bit. The stereotypical, the usual Deandre Ayton sort of late March swoon here, where it just feels like he's ready for the playoffs. I can't necessarily blame him. I am ready as well. What are your vibes on Ayton right now heading into the postseason? And I guess with this hip contusion behind him, I'm not sure it was ever that serious, but he is back in the lineup and ready to go.
Yeah, and it's funny to say this about a player as young as DeAndre and technically still unproven in a sense, that where he's not like a veteran that's gone through a ton of playoff games, but it seems like every postseason he shows up. So that's kind of the funny thing. Like we were texting, like, yeah, in March he kind of coasts a little bit, like he's a grizzled vet out there, and then once the playoffs roll around, big games, he's going to step up and be engaged. With him, it's just all about engagement. It's never about the stats. I'll beat that dead horse over and over again. Everyone knows his defense and just doing the little things, especially with KD on board offensively. His role is going to be pretty minimal. Just finish around the rim, play hard, grab offensive rebounds, and try hard on defense, contest shots, and that, if he can do that in the playoffs, then we're fine. But yeah, today was nothing special. It was just kind of him trying to work his way back from an injury. There's always a little bit of rust that you have to shake off too in that first game back, whether it's a serious injury or not, and conditioning and all that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does at home, and hopefully, we can get a few more, big Ayton games before leading into the playoffs, just so he can get his confidence rolling, because especially when KD is back, because there's a couple games, with KD where it just seemed like he was almost non-existent offensively. So I think finding a way for him to have a big game with KD would be awesome, just heading in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that didn't really happen at all, right? I mean, I remember I did a show, I think leading into the game that KD ended up spraining the ankle, and I broke down the touches and the usage, and any way you sliced it, Ayton was like dramatically getting cut back what his role was on offense. And I think that I think that's something that will naturally feel itself out over the course of the remaining regular season games and even as the playoffs go along. And honestly, I don't even know, it's not even Durant himself. It was just sort of a like, how many mouths to feed type of thing with him, where I think Durant actually was one of the guys most visibly sort of trying to involve Ayton. Yep. It's just, there's only so many shots. So when Ayton comes back, I agree with you. I hope that there is a little bit of an emphasis, not even from Monty or anything, but just from the players on the court to say, hey, like, let's make sure he feels engaged and involved, just so that we know what that looks like, we know what that feels like to incorporate him, to emphasize him in the offense, even when everybody's healthy, because you don't want to build the habit of he never gets a touch, and then you're in a big playoff game and you need him, and he hasn't scored 20 points in a month, and you're wondering what happened. So I agree. I don't think the injury was serious. He didn't look hampered by it today by any means. It's also his first game back, so even though I was making the jokes about the sort of lethargic vibe from him, I don't want to overstate that by any means. Let's talk a little bit about matchups. I think we're getting close enough. I don't believe in the Warriors enough to think that they're going to pass it up. And if this is going to be more of an offensive team, at least who's playing and how they play, I think that sets up a pretty fascinating Clippers matchup if that's indeed what we get in round one, Brandon. So let's kind of think about that a little bit here in the next segment. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by Built Bar and Built March Madness specifically. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff. Look, if you've been listening to Locked On Suns for long, you've heard about them plenty. I'm sure you've bought a box before. I'm going cookie dough chunk puff all the way. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of their favorite Built Bar. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You've got to try them. They're the best protein bars ever, and they don't even realize just how good they are for you because they're all about flavor. They're all about making these things tasty first and foremost. What makes them so good is they're covered in 100% chocolate, delicious flavors, fruit flavors, caramel nut flavors, or just the sweet, good, rich chocolate. Whatever you love, there's going to be something for you. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. All right, Brandon. So here's the deal. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, I am not a believer in the Golden State Warriors. And I don't think that they're going to catch the Suns or the Clippers in the standings or the Suns. I believe in them potentially to fulfill their destiny in the playoffs. I just don't think in the regular season, like we can stop tricking ourselves here. They have 4 road games left. If they win one of them, great. And so that's that. That means that the Suns are most likely to play the Clippers, who are up at halftime against the Bulls, but not by much. People might know the result of that game by the time they're listening to this one, so we'll see. But either way, it feels like we're headed towards Suns Clippers in the first round. I haven't really done a ton of matchup stuff on the podcast because it's too soon. It had been too soon to really say, but we're in the single digits of games left. So what do you feel like, aside from the obvious Paul George injury, is going to be on your mind with a potential Suns Clippers first round series?
So I actually disagree a little bit because I think Golden State's still in play. Just because looking at the Clippers schedule, they have back-to-back games at Memphis, and then the very next game after that second game against Memphis is an actual back-to-back at New Orleans, and then you have the Lakers and a game at Phoenix, and those are 2 teams that obviously want to win for standing. So there's a chance they could really still, even if they pull off this Bulls game. And just looking at the Warriors schedule as well, they have like the Spurs and the Thunder and a couple other pretty winnable games. So I don't think it's necessarily set, but I do agree that the Clippers are still the favorites, and that's probably most likely the matchup. And they're still terrifying just because it's the same thing as last time we faced them in the playoffs, except, switch Kawhi and Paul George with injuries. And, I don't know if you guys all remember this, I'm sure, is just going back when everyone's like, is Kawhi going to suit up tomorrow? Is he going to suit up the next game? Like, people just didn't know. I feel like that's what Paul George's situation will be like all over again.
Yeah.
So they're still, even without Paul George, they're a good team. They're not going to lay down. And Ty Lue's a great coach. So that's not an easy first round matchup by any means. And, if it's them, which I most likely going to be them, but you never know if they steamroll a little bit. So it's a tough matchup.
I think that the Paul George thing to me is, I would expect, like, not my read on it, but if I'm the Suns, I'm planning that he'll miss 0 games. I'm expecting or believing he'll miss maybe the first 1 or 2. And I'm hoping he misses, the first 3 or 4, right? Like, I think that's kind of the way that you would have to play it. The Clippers are an interesting team to me. And part of why I wanted to kind of finally dive in a little bit is this topic of, like, especially once Durant comes back, which we will talk about in the next segment. This team it seems like it's the Suns are readying to be more of an offensive team come playoff time than they have been in the regular season, and definitely than they have been in the past 2 postseasons, where they're going to live or die by some of these, scorers off the bench. They're going to live and die by, the ability of somebody like Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton to score, rather than, somebody like, can Jake Crowder stop so-and-so? That was a lot of the X Factor stuff in the past. The Clippers are an interesting kind of, I don't want to say opposite of that, but because of the comfort and the familiarity that these teams have, I think that's interesting. I think the fact that they're going to be more of a small ball threat is interesting to me. And then the fact that I don't really know what their backcourt is going to be is obviously, a big factor for them with the Russell Westbrook addition, the Eric Gordon addition, the health of Norm Powell, some of these unknowns in addition to Paul George. It's interesting because I think, to me, Chris Paul is going to be one of the biggest questions no matter who the Suns play. And I don't know what to expect from what his job would be defensively or who he would be guarded by if it was the Clippers. And I know that's maybe a secondary thing because we're going to talk about Durant and Booker the most, but that's kind of where my head goes when I think about the Clippers.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just going back to the Warriors as well, that's a great comment by Nicholas, just saying, I'm not worried about the Clippers without Reggie Jackson or Pat Bev.
I hope. Are we assuming sarcasm? I really hope that that's sarcasm. Otherwise,
Reggie Jackson.
We need to tell Nick who the best players on the Clippers are. But anyway, yes, go ahead. Warriors.
The Warriors, I think they're a team I want nothing to do with in the first round, just because they can go nuclear at any moment, and their home court advantage as well. Like, they're just one of those teams that you just don't want to get them early, because I don't know. I just don't feel great about that matchup. I still think the Suns could beat them. It's just going to be. There's less certainty when you're going in a matchup against Steph Curry and Draymond and Clay, guys that have been there and done that. Whereas the Clippers, like you mentioned, they don't know almost on a day-to-day basis of when Paul George is going to return. That kind of messes with the lineup a little bit and just getting in players' head. Like, what's my role going to be tonight? So just trying to get Paul George ease back in there. That's something that will be in the back of their minds. But yeah, Chris Paul in that matchup. Honestly, I think there's going to be times where the Suns have to go point book. It really just depends on what Ty Lue tries to do. But I know Lue's an excellent coach. That's probably what scares me the most, along with Kawhi Leonard. He's had a few games where he's looked like his old self, just a two-way monster. So they're definitely a team to worry about. But really, at the end of the day, if the Suns are healthy, I think they can pull it off. It's not anything I'm overly anxious about, but they're not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, Golden State 13th on offense, 18th on defense this season. The Clippers are 23rd on offense and 15th on defense. The Clippers, like anything you look at with them, it feels like they're just not a good team, which is weird. They're also one of the luckier teams in the NBA in terms of their expected wins versus their actual wins. They're overperforming by more than 3, so they've gotten pretty lucky. They should be even worse, the Clippers. So I don't know, but you just have those superstars, and it's always going to be a fear factor with them. I think I mentioned I'm looking more at the offense, and that is true. I think the reason the Clippers, to me, are one of the scarier matchups too, though, is, and I said this from the very beginning before Durant ever even suited up, I did a show about the worst playoff matchups, and I listed the Clippers because I don't know who guards Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the Suns side. Okogie is the answer for one of those guys, I would think. So probably he guards Kawhi would be my assumption. And then I guess you could put some lineups together where Torrey Craig and him are both out there, but that's not very common. You're basically getting to Booker and or Durant needing to defend an all NBA caliber player late in games, possession after possession, game after game over what will probably be a fairly long series. That is worrisome, obviously, as well. But I think I agree with you. I mean, because of that uncertainty, I think I still would favor the Suns. I do just feel like, again, that what we've seen from this offense kind of just changes what the tone of the series would be. I mean, people remember game 4 of the Suns Clippers series was in the 80s in 2021. They had, I think the Valley Oop game was in the low hundreds. So it was ugly at that time. And I don't think the series would look the same at all when it gets replayed, considering Durant and Kawhi are in there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And honestly, I think right now, another factor with that Clippers series is looking at home court advantage. I think that's going to be huge for the Suns to have that boost. So locking in the 4 seed is going to be something that I think that's a major reason why KD is coming back when he's coming back. They really want to just solidify that spot, get a few more wins, and also get that rhythm going, get those reps in. Like I've mentioned earlier, just with the bench unit too, trying to figure out that, lock in that rotation, because I don't think Monty's going to try to, trot out a 13-man playoff lineup. So hopefully not. You never know. But, I think trying to lock in that lineup and get home court, because I think anytime you're a team working through kinks and you're as explosive offensively as the Suns can be, having that home crowd to just boost the momentum is massive. We've seen that shift games time and time again. So I think, especially for that first round specifically, they need to lock in home court advantage 100%, because I just don't. I think that could be the difference between a game or two, which could ultimately be the difference of the series. Because, campaign going off, Terrence Ross going off, guys like that stepping up at home. Role players play better at home in the playoffs, and the Suns need the role players to step up. So the Clippers series, I think, will be huge for Josh Okogie too. That has his name all over it. Last time they played, he hit 6 threes against them. So I think, and he did a great job on Kawhi. Kawhi had an off shooting night. But like you said, anytime you have 2 superstars like George and Kawhi, it's definitely there's no guarantees.
Yeah, it should be interesting. All valid points. We don't have a lot of time in this segment, so let's dive into Kevin Durant returning Wednesday. Even the local broadcast is talking about it like it's a given, so I guess we can just presume that is it, all systems go there. We'll talk about what to expect, what will change, what we're hoping to see, all of that. We're not fully day of yet here on Monday/Tuesday as this show is going up, but I think it's fine to let the excitement start now. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the nets. We have championship odds. I know they put the tournament in a singular at the top here. There are 2 going on. We have championship odds for the women's tournament. South Carolina, the heavy favorite at -360. I feel like, so LSU is +600 here. Iowa is +900. It feels like Iowa should be probably, I don't know, a little bit higher. I think that they're the second best team. And if South Carolina were to lose, the most likely team to beat them would be Iowa. And then Iowa would go on to be the favorites. I don't know. I just think from a math standpoint, it's worth a look, but maybe you feel differently. Either way, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Wager on everything from money line to point spreads to which team will be winning. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Kevin Durant returning Wednesday, Brandon, and this is basically exactly 3 weeks from when that injury happened. And there's no shortage of things we're all excited for, namely finally seeing this man on Footprint Center hardwood. But with 7 games left in the season, so if he plays every single one, they will play 10 games together. And not I don't even know if like the wins and losses is even what I mean, but just some high profile games. I mean, national TV on Wednesday against the Wolves, 2 games against the Nuggets, and then at the Lakers and home versus the Clippers to wrap things up. It could be silly. It could be just like heartstrings. It could be X's and O's. What will you have your eye on Wednesday night when KD is back in the lineup?
So just going back to the crowd, just the environment, I think it's going to be electric. Obviously, the injury or the slip before that first supposed game, was pretty devastating. So I think the fans have been waiting for so long. It almost feels like the trade happened a year ago at this point, and he still hasn't made his home debut. It's pretty wild. But yeah, and like
7 weeks.
Yeah, it's crazy. Time's flying.
It's wild.
And there's crazy. It's also wild that there's only 7 games left. I think at this point he's probably going to play in 6 of those 7. If I had to guess, because they do have a back-to-back, April 6th and 7th. One of them's first Denver, and then the next night they're going to LA. So I could see them either sitting in the front of that or back. Just there's no need to play a superstar.
Sit him at the Lakers. That's my vote. Play against the Nuggets. It's also on national TV. So come on, do it for the fans.
Yeah, I agree. And it's at home as well. So,
yeah,
I think that's a game that they could use him for. But, anyways, getting back to that point, I think, that would put us at 9 total KD games. And is that enough? I don't know if there's any certain equation of where it would be enough. But one thing I do know is these guys know how to play off each other already in terms of just the role he's going to be in. He plays so naturally within the flow of their offense that it should be pretty seamless. So I'm just looking forward to getting some more moments of Booker and KD like we did in that Dallas game. We may not get a performance like that again in the regular season in terms of both of them doing what they did at that degree at the same time, but I sure as hell hope so, because Booker's been playing out of his mind. So if KD can, have a couple breakout games, that'd be awesome.
Kevin Durant played 98 non-garbage time minutes for the Suns before he got hurt. The Suns were outscored their opponent by 24 points per 100 possessions when he was out there. The offense was 13 points better. The defense was 11 points better. And they won all 3 of those games. So I don't think what I'm necessarily looking for or like watching for is wins and losses, although they do need to keep winning, or even necessarily individual, like how do they match up against so-and-so. Although I do feel like the Wolves, Brandon, is an interesting one because Cat is healthy again. And so Jaden McDaniels is the obvious guy who would guard Durant, but you run into a problem very quickly with where does everyone else go? I could see like maybe one of those guys, the big men on Minnesota guards Okogie, and then the other one guards Ayton, and then that allows McDaniels to guard Durant. But even aside from all of that, I just think it ended up being some pretty good tests. I would have liked for him to only miss 2 weeks and then to get to play this big weekend of games that we're recapping today, because I think those were pretty good as well. The Lakers, Kings, and Sixers especially. But whatever, it happened the way that it happened. I just think 2 games against the Nuggets, the Wolves, and then the 2 LA teams, and Oklahoma City, who has proven to be a thorn in the Suns' side a little bit, and to just beat them in these 4 games in like a month and a half that they're playing against each other. So I think it's nice that the Suns didn't have a super cake schedule at the end here, or that they haven't wrapped up the standings, their spot in the standings yet. There's still something to play for. These games are meaningful, and the opponents are pretty good, and we will get to like learn something from the team. They will get to learn about themselves a little bit, and they will be tested in a way that this time last year we were talking already about when should they start resting people, when are they going to get the record, blah, blah, blah. And if a player had been coming back from injury at that point, I think the Suns probably just would have sat them. So this is lined up better on all sides, I think, for these 7 games to actually matter.
Yeah, I agree with that. Those are all great points. And to just kind of add to that, I think, not only from the matchup standpoint, but just these teams that they're going up against, they know that they're going to have to take it up a notch with KD coming back, especially the national TV games. The Suns, that's just part of having Kevin Durant on your team. Like the players on the other team, they're going to have a little more pep in their step. They're going to be a little more amped up for those games. So it's kind of like we saw with the Suns coming off 64 wins. They're kind of the team with the target on their back early in the next season. And, a lot of teams remembered what they did to them during the regular season, sometimes, flexing on them or, just having fun. Teams don't forget that stuff, especially those young teams that are hungry. And the Suns used to be that team. So I think some of these teams, especially like the Wolves, it's a great example of a team that they're going to get up for that challenge. They're not going to back down. They're still fighting for a playoff spot. So, and like you mentioned, just with the big men, it's going to be an interesting X's and O's matchup too, that I think should help them prepare for the playoffs. And then the Denver games, honestly, at this point, Denver doesn't have a ton to play for, but at the same time, it's for them, like a motivating factor, just be making a statement that, this new look Suns team is, they're not a threat for us. We're still the 1 seed. This is, the West still runs through Denver. So they're going to try to be making that statement. So there's definitely some storylines and some tests that will come along the way. So that'll definitely help come playoff time.
It's interesting. I'm curious by that. I think this Friday, the Nuggets will definitely, play their guys, and, they might not have an incentive to be like going full throttle, but they have to, still keep winning to keep Memphis at bay, because the Grizzlies are winners of 6 straight and they are 9-1 in their past 10. So, the Nuggets are only 3 games ahead of them. I'm curious if that Thursday, April 6th game matters for the Nuggets. I think it probably will. I think this will go down basically to the wire between those 2 teams, and that'll help the Suns, I guess, and it'll help us not have to watch, KD and Booker versus like Thomas Bryant or whoever would be backing up the Nuggets guys. But it should be a blast. I'm excited. I'm sure a lot of people listening will be at that game. Maybe some of the last affordable Kevin Durant games that will be there to go around, looking at some of those playoff ticket prices that were going around today as people were getting their emails. But I know that was fixed. If anyone is actually listening, I understand that things were done incorrectly, but it's back now. They're still going to be very expensive. I hope people enjoy the last remaining regular season games, the final actual home debut of the big ticket, the big acquisition that the Suns were able to nab 7 weeks ago, which is an insane thing to say. But you can read Brandon at brightsideofthesun.com. If you like what you're hearing, you can also follow or subscribe to this show. Brandon is here every week. I am here every day in your feed, giving you the latest on the Phoenix Suns, getting you locked on to your favorite team. That'll wrap us up for today, though, guys. In the meantime, go make Locked On NBA your second listen today. Get caught up on all things NBA. There is more going on than just in Phoenix. They have you covered for all of it, available on all podcast platforms. And we will catch you all tomorrow.